A Northwoods veteran's trip to Washington for much more than just himself. This is our top story tonight on Newswatch 12 at 6.
Your local news, weather, and sports from where you live. Newswatch 12 at 6 starts now.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Conover veteran Al Johnson remembers his brother Jack on this Memorial Day. Jack was killed in Korea while serving in the Army. Al was serving in the Navy at that time. Those memories were especially meaningful for Al on this month's Never Forgotten honor flight to Washington, D.C. Newswatch 12's Ben Meyer was on the flight and has their story.
Empty wheelchairs rolled by North Central Wisconsin veterans in Washington, D.C. They represent those who didn't make it home from war. Into one of the wheelchairs was placed a picture representing one specific soldier.
This guy is a younger brother, youngest one of 5 boys.
Korean War veteran Al Johnson went on this month's Never Forgotten honor flight for something more than just seeing the memorial in his honor. He went to remember and represent his brother Jack.
He died at about the age of 20, and it was an accidental death.
Jack was in the Army, serving in Korea, when a truck he was driving went over a cliff. Escorting Jack's body back to Wisconsin was important for Al, so important that he was temporarily transferred from the Navy to the Army to do it more than 6 decades ago.
Mike has never seen Jack, of course, He died before he was born.
Mike is Al's son and Jack's nephew. He escorted his father, in a way, through the Korean War memorial that means so much.
This was really him. He needed to do this. And that part of his experience with it, I think, compelled him to really make a trip here with his brother Jack.
Like all veterans on the flight, Al was warmly welcomed by grateful Americans in Washington and Wisconsin. But this trip wasn't so much about Al.
What Jack did with my father was really bring him here.
And how would Jack feel about what his brother did for him on the honor flight?
Oh boy, that's pretty tough. We feel like brothers, like these guys are. They're all brothers.
Covering the news in Washington, D.C., Ben Meyer, Newswatch 12.
Getting Stevens Point Navy veteran Joe Phillips talking usually isn't too difficult, but Joe was left speechless many times on last week's Never Forgotten honor flight to Washington, D.C. He was one of 8 World War II veterans on the flight. Newswatch 12's Ben Meyer was alongside.
If you can tell me what you remember from Iwo Jima. You'd rather not? That's okay.
Joe Phillips will tell you about his Navy service in World War II, but some topics, like his experience at Iwo Jima, are just too difficult. It's not because Joe doesn't remember. At only 17 years old, he was working with anti-aircraft guns all over the Pacific.
We were down in the Marianas, in Wake Island, Guam, Anahuac, Saipan, Tinian.
With a little prodding, you can even get Joe to admit he was the best gunner on his ship.
Right?
Maybe I'm bragging a little bit.
A Stevens Point doctor, Bill Benn, prodded him to pack his memories and experience something Joe never had. The World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., built in his honor.
Joe's a patient of mine.
Because of Joe's incredible story, Bill convinced him to become one of 8 World War II veterans on this month's Never Forgotten honor flight.
And this guy is actually laying back on a ship, shooting at kamikaze planes, trying to kill his friends. And his ship had the best record in the Navy of not being shot down by, not being hit by kamikazes. So pretty amazing bravery for a 17-year-old boy from central Wisconsin.
Joe's first time experiencing the memorial dedicated to him and his fellow Americans took almost all the words out of his mouth.
Just tears me all up.
And the battle Joe couldn't talk about?
He was at Iwo Jima. We're going to see the Iwo Jima monument today. So it's pretty awesome to see a monument to the place he was at as a 17-year-old kid. I think it's pretty special.
While Joe was at the Iwo Jima monument, honor flight organizers gave him a vial of sand from that island. Once again, that left this war hero speechless. Covering the news in Washington, D.C., Ben Meyer, Newswatch 12.
World War II and Korean War veterans from north central Wisconsin often faced too many enemy fighters, had too little to eat, and were exposed to too much violence at such a young age. And for many, it took too much time for our country to memorialize them. Some of those veterans traveled to Washington on this month's Never Forgotten Honor Flight to finally see the memorials. It took them too long to see. Newswatch 12's Ben Meyer traveled along with them.
A welcome like this took too long for Wisconsin Korean War veterans like Lloyd Larson.
We just thought we would have forgotten more. That's there. So many veterans figured that.
Lloyd had never experienced his memorial, one that wasn't finished for too long, finished more than 40 years after the war.
This year, I never had a chance to see it, and I thought this is one time in a lifetime. I'm 82 years old, and this is just a dream.
That's true, too, for Ray Moore. The faces in the wall and on the statues at the Korean War Memorial took him back to his service time so long ago.
I'm just overwhelmed with it. Yeah? I get a little emotional just looking at it. Yeah. Because, you look like you know him.
Too long. The World War II memorial wasn't finished until nearly 60 years after the war. Years ago, World War II vet Dick Donahue visited Washington. He found no memorial for him and his fellow Americans.
I was kind of disappointed, so now I'm not disappointed. I think it's really pretty nice.
But instead of etchings in stone or statues of steel, perhaps something else was the most striking thing that took too long. The welcome back home these veterans deserved.
Welcome back!
Covering the news in Washington, D.C., Ben Meyer, Newswatch 12.
Some of them waited decades for proper recognitions. Veterans on this month's Never Forgotten Honor Flight finally got the praise they deserve. This is our top story tonight on Newswatch 12 at 6.
Your local news, weather, and sports from where you live. Newswatch 12 at 6 starts now.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Many north central Wisconsin veterans from last century's wars came home to nothing. No parades, no cheering crowds, no hugs and kisses. Some of them felt forgotten. Many of these war heroes got the reception they deserved. Decades later on this month's Never Forgotten Honor Flight. Newswatch 12's Ben Meyer was on that flight and brings us the story of recognition that took too long.
World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam War veterans had barely set foot on the ground in Washington, D.C. This was their reception. Not families, not friends. These were all strangers, just waiting for their flights out of Washington's Reagan Airport.
Everybody, the people have been so nice. We got such a good reception. It's hard to believe.
Seeing the monuments and memorials, many for the first time, is something these veterans won't forget.
Thank you for your service.
But it was quieter moments like this they might remember even more. Spontaneous groups of school children with no connection to these 80-year-olds lined up to shake their hands and thank them for what they did.
Put tears to your eyes. You couldn't help it. It was something that's unreal.
Thank you so much.
On the way home, an affirmation.
Somebody loves every one of you guys.
Mail call from loved ones, elected officials, and perfect strangers. After touchdown, one final welcome, this one a welcome home many never got after war service.
It's quite a difference compared to when I came home. The first time they didn't have nothing like that.
A celebrated reunion with family and friends, just part of a glorious parade in their name, so long overdue. We're covering the news in Washington, D.C. Ben Meyer, Newswatch 12.